My name is Monk Rowe, and I'm in Woodstock, speaking with Karl Berger. Thanks for having me in your house.
Oh, you're most welcome.
I couldn't resist talking with Ingrid about the people that come by looking for the hippies.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Right, they're still coming.
Yeah, it's somehow poetic justice that you guys ended up in this place, you know, Woodstock. I mean, everybody knows the word.
It's the most famous small town in the world.
Yeah. and the festival didn't even happen here, right?
No.
So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah. But most of the musicians on that festival lived here. You know, like Jimmy lived here, and Bob Dylan lived here, and the band lived here. They all lived here. Janis Joplin, because Albert Grossman had his studio here, and he ran the record company that they all recorded for, and you know, he was sort of the reigning champion at the time, you know. And everybody also played here in a little place called the Espresso Cafe. And yeah, so it was, in a way, it did have more to do with Woodstock than people might think. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. When you were getting into jazz in Germany and then in France,
yeah,
you sort of entered the jazz world at the bebop stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, of course.
So it's an interesting place to start because that was
right
as modern as it was getting
at
that time. Is that do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so. And also one lucky streak that I had was that Heidelberg had a little club called the Car 54, and the surrounding Army and Air Force stations had all bands, and in those bands played a few jazz musicians who later became pretty well known, such as Cedar Walton or Lex Humphreys and Don Ellis, and they would all come to that club, where I was like the house pianist.
Wow.
And we would be playing every night till 5 in the morning. And there would be some guys who were with the military police who would like write out the passes for everybody so they could like stay late. And so it was like sort of like growing up in New York in the session scene, you know.
Wow. Because
we literally played with some of the best musicians in the world, you know, all the time.
So you were playing Monk tunes and Charlie Parker tunes.
Yeah, and there was no real books at the time, so you had to learn everything orally, like, you know, by just like listening. You know.
Right. Boy, that's some education.
I know. I wish jazz education would go that way, but that's the way to do it, you know. I think that was like a very, you know, we also could play every night, which now people don't have a chance to, you know. That's one of the drawbacks of our time.
Yeah. I recently did an interview with the drummer Carl Allen, who is into, he said the classroom is the new bandstand.
Yeah, I know.
You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah,
it should be, you know, people should play as much as possible. And I remember when I was chair at UMass in Dartmouth, I went to the president's office and I said, we need to do less classes and more playing, you know. But then it happened to be not a music major, but it was like a MB, you know. Whatever, it was like sort of oriented towards theory more than it was oriented towards performance, you know. So people would get less credit for playing than sitting in a classroom.
It reminds me of an anecdote. I knew a fellow who took an improv class at Eastman School of Music.
Right.
I said, well, what are you improvising? He said, we're not improvising. We're just studying about improvising.
About, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, boy.
No,
well, I'm trying to figure out what, Ingrid addressed this somewhat, but this creative, forward-thinking, pushing the boundaries of music happened to you early on.
Yeah, yeah.
How How come?
Well, you know, first of all, my background is classical. I'm a classical pianist. I was anyway, until I had to tell my classical teacher that I won't pursue a classical career because I want to play my own music. I didn't want to play other people's music, you know. So that split happened very early on. But I have a classical background, you know, and jazz always interested me. Like when I was 14 years old, I remember there was this moment where I've heard a jam session by American musicians, and that changed sort of my whole thing. Like I said, that's what I want to do.
Was it a live jam session?
Okay. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. It was a live session with some great players, and it was just amazing. You know, for me, it was like, wow, that's what I want to do.
You know, I think there's the fact that it was live added that whole visual
exactly.
life.
Yes.
How are they doing that? You know, how does one person know when to stop, or you know, this whole?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Is that a question?
No, I just was a comment. I know that just watching people play is as important as listening to sometimes.
I mean, you know, that whole frenzy about recordings, they call recordings for a reason, you know. It's a record of music, it's not the music.
It's
so people think of CDs as the music, but that's the record of the music, you know. So sooner or later, live music will come back with a vengeance, you know, like it'll come back very strong. Because people will get tired of all these artificial sounds once they get to hear live music. Right now, they don't hear much live music because even those that do play live try to play as if they were doing a record, like they're having all this electronic equipment to play through. Yeah. So people don't really hear a live saxophone. They hear a saxophone played through a microphone. You know what I mean? So at the Creative Music Studio, we made sure there were no mics except for singers, you know, and guitar players maybe, you know, pickups or so. But there was no mics for horns or anything like that, or drums. And because that's what happens now. You go into a club, first of all, the music is about 3 times louder than it needs to be, which actually makes people talk louder and create more commotion, you know. So, and then people play louder in order to overcome that. And so the whole level of the music is way up there, and it's basically all through loudspeakers. You don't really hear the sound of a saxophone. Or
and you feel like you're being assaulted. You know, it's not a healthy...
No, we do it the opposite. When I play in a room where there's talking going on, I play softer, until you can hardly hear us play anymore. So people really need to listen. And that's what quiets down a room, you know. Yeah.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I have a couple excerpts here that I wanted to ask you about. You guys have done so much music, I'm not sure you remember everything you did, but...
Oh. Yeah, that's from the Milestone album.
1969?
1969, yeah.
So was this written out?
Tune.
That much of it?
Yeah, this is a tune.
Because I know the tune comes back later.
Yeah, this is a tune called Tune In. That's like So the Carlos has everybody has the melody, you know, and Blackwell plays with his eyes closed, so he doesn't need any music.
I'm just going to ask about that.
No, Blackwell doesn't read. He never read.
Okay.
But he is so fast, like, you know, you can write the most intricate pattern and he'll play it, and next time he'll play a new version of it, and everyone will be perfect. He was such a perfectionist in every way, like, you know, but you could not pin him down on a pattern. You know, if you couldn't tell Blackwell what to play. He would come up with the patterns, but every take would be a different pattern he would come up with. You know? So he was like one of a kind. We just played in Berlin with a guy, Han Benning. He's a drummer, and he's sort of similar. He had that similar thing. He said, like when they gave him a chart, he says, I play with my eyes closed. But he played perfect arrangements, and the arrangement would always be slightly different every time he played it, you know. So that's sort of a talent that someone must have, you know.
That being in the moment, I know you both have talked about that.
Right.
Do you, when you're doing, let me rephrase. I saw a couple things in your Columbia interview that I thought were important.
Okay.
And you said the relationship of rhythm and playing with a rhythm in free jazz sometimes is controversial. Like, you said in Berlin that if you were playing free jazz, you weren't supposed to be playing steady time.
Yeah. Well, you know, there are factions of free jazz movements, particularly actually in Europe and not so much here, that insisted on that time was sort of out of the question, like you would not go there, you know. And that's still the case. There's a few free jazz festivals in Europe where you cannot play time, like they would like boo you, you know. You know, and I found in America nobody really quite thinks like that. You know, even Albert Ayler didn't think that way. You know, like they just think of movement, and you can play that in time, out of time, but there has to be that movement, you know, that propulsion that defines what jazz is all about, you know. And that can be generated in multiple ways, you know. Like I played a lot with Rashid Ali, and he was like playing 4 times at the same time, you know, that kind of approach. And that would move, but the whole thing was about the train has to be going, you know, no matter how you do it.
Yeah.
And I play a lot of, like Blackwell was like basically a traditional player in a lot of ways. Like he played time always, but he played time that you would not count to measures. So it's not measured time, like you don't play 4 or 5 or 3, but he would just play 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and depending where the phrase falls, that would be the 1, you know.
I see.
You hear that in Ornette's music all the time, right? To follow the phrase. And that's not really only a jazz phenomenon, by the way. I mean, the Beatles wrote songs and they follow the words. Like there's some words that just fall on 5 and then the beat is there, you know, so.
I played this,
which is the blues too, you know.
Especially the early blues.
Yeah, early blues is like that, you know, and even famous blues guys like John Lee Hooker, you hear that all the time, you know. And I remember very early on at that club in Heidelberg, there was a concert series coming through called, it was sort of a blues. It was like a tour that Jim Norman Granz did, I think.
Some of the Chicago.
And he had like some Chicago guys and then some from the South. And they were even in our club, they were like fighting over whether the blues got 12 bars or not. You know, Sonny Boy Williamson was there, and he would say, the blues is where the words end. That's the form of the blues, you know, wherever the words go.
Yeah.
You know, this could be 12 and a half or 11 and a half or 13 or whatever. You just have to listen to the words. So the words were more important. And this is with John Lee Hooker too. Like he sings, and depending how he phrases the last word, it'll be another half a bar or not, you know.
But they were doing that.
And that's why I'm saying, like Blackwell, for example, he comes from New Orleans. And in the South, there's just much less of an idea of bars.
Okay.
So, you know, they're really thinking more in terms of phrasing words. And so Ornette's music is like that, you know. He doesn't count bars. There's no bars.
As a school musician, can you do that on purpose?
Yeah, of course, yeah. You have to learn what we call beat for beat attention. This is our training that we do with the Creative Music Studio. I call it beat for beat attention. That means each beat has the same attention for it, so you're not going for like one and it's more important than the 2 or the 4. The 4 is just as important as the 1. And if you go for each beat, out of a sudden there's no need for a bar line because you are there. So once you're there, you don't need to know it's 4 or it's 5. You're present on each beat, right? So once you go there, the music becomes completely open and free, you know. And then you can still play 4/4, but you're going to play it in a different way than you did before, you know. Because if you think bars being musical parameters, they are not. They are just lines to help a conductor keep a band together or something. They have nothing to do with the music, really. When you look at scores that Bach wrote, he didn't write within bar lines. He put bar lines, but the phrases all go over the bar lines, all of them. You know, as a matter of fact, you can only interpret Bach's music if you ignore the bar lines. You know, that's what Glenn Gould did. You know, his performances. When you listen, it's just a flow. You don't hear bar lines. When you hear bar lines, then there's something wrong with the music. It's not really well assimilated.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because I know I'm the type of person that if you put on some Latin music or some world music, I'm immediately trying to figure it out.
Okay.
And if I can't, I get aggravated.
Okay.
And I just should like.
Yeah, you should just go for each beat. That's the point. Yeah, you know, and this is why, you know, when we started the Creative Music Studio, I basically accommodated ourselves by wanting to know stuff. So the best way to learn things is to teach them, because when you teach them, you need to know what you're talking about. So you're going to have a lot more focus on the subject than if you just think about it. And so my question was always, what's common to all the music, to every kind of music? Because once you know that, and you study from that point of view rather than from a given style, then you have a much more of an ability to find out who you are as a musician, what you want to play. What is that I want to play? Maybe I just want to play a simple song, but I'm caught in jazz school and I'm learning, so maybe I don't even want that. What I really want is something quite different, you know.
Did you avoid the word jazz?
Yeah, as much as possible, because you know, if I mention the word jazz in a room with 20 people, each of these 20 people have a completely different sound in their head. Right? So this word is no longer functional. You know, it really isn't. It is functional in the sense that there's a sense of propulsion that you have in world music, which sort of got lost in the European music. European music got much more into form and more into form, and is being thought of and listened to from the form element and not from the propulsion of the music, which is like in every world music area, whether you go to Africa, to the Mideast, wherever you go, you're going to hear a beat, right? It's mostly played by drums, but even if it's not played by drums, you're going to play from a beat. And classical music till the 19th century was played that way too. There was no conductors in Bach's time or even Mozart's time. There were no real conductors.
The music had a pulse which kept everybody together.
You played from a pulse, so you played like jazz. And as a matter of fact, I think that Bach's music, I don't think that Bach ever played the piano, the organ charts or keyboard charts that he wrote for himself. you know, he was, when you look at his scores, there's no corrections. He's improvising. There's no corrections in the scores when you look at his manuscripts. So that means he was just improvising. He was just... So I imagine he wasn't looking at the score when he played on Sunday morning. He just played.
Our first jazz musician.
Yeah, so basically that whole idea of jazz is nothing new. Like, you know, I would also imagine from the intonation point of view, Baroque music probably sounded a lot more like Moroccan music or something, because the idea of tempered tuning was just invented then.
Did you say Baroque music?
Yeah.
And Moroccan music?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or any non-tempered music, because the tempered system was invented at the same time. So the people who played at that time were not really accustomed to hear this way.
Oh.
You know, that was just for the composer to be able to manipulate the changes, but the players were still non-tempered players. So it must have been completely different sound than what we are hearing now.
Yeah.
You know? Now it sounds very artificial, actually, you know.
Which sounds artificial to play?
The tuning, the classical tuning is very artificial from a point of view of a world musical viewpoint, you know, of a non-tempered intonation.
Wasn't that part of Ornette Coleman's approach about this note can be played here or it can be played depending on how I feel?
Exactly, exactly.
Doesn't he say that about my voice, right?
Yeah.
It can be translated into many languages.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. You know, like Ornette is very aware of that and has done like a lot of, like his whole harmonic thing is about that, really. So yeah, what we're hearing now is sort of distilled version of tempered tuning, which is like an artificial system, you know.
Well, I'm going to guess that you probably had a different reaction to this LP than I did, the Free Jazz by Ornette Coleman. Did you know him when he did this?
No, that came up. When was that done? I think that was done in the late 50s, early 60s, right? 61 something?
1960.
60, yeah. So we only came over, we met Ornette in 65.
Okay.
He came to Paris with his trio.
Where we met him in Europe.
And then he came down to the club where we played with Don Cherry. That's how we met Ornette. So that was 65.
I'm just gonna,
72.
Okay, so just going to put on it. Now,
yeah, we knew Eric a year before. We played with Eric on his last gig in Berlin. We actually brought him to the hospital.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a sad situation, but that was 64.
Do you remember hearing that and what you thought of it?
Yeah, well, nothing to think about.
Now, what do you mean by that?
I wasn't thinking about it. I was listening to it.
That's an interesting statement.
Yeah, I was, you know,
feeling about it.
If you if you were thinking about it, that would mean like you're criticizing it or you're trying to take it apart. But this is a feel, like this is like
it's a feel.
You know, and when I hear this, I'm like in the middle of music. It's like it's a different world, and I'm no longer in my thinking world. Wow. You know, immediately, as soon as I hear even one of these chords, it's like we're in the music world now. You know.
Thank you for saying that. I just think it's very interesting what you just said.
Yeah.
Because...
Well, see, I'm working on a book called Music Mind, and I'm trying to explain that music is being thought of as something that entertains us and that we use for certain reasons and that and this and this. But it's a world. You go there, and everybody can go there. And once you go there, you're in the world of spontaneity, and you're no longer in a thinking world. As a matter of fact, you leave the thinking world behind. You know, and everybody can go there, you know, everybody, whether you play or not. You know, and this is a very important issue because we've forgotten about that. All the tribal societies in the world in the past have had that place where they went every day for hours, just singing and dancing, every day, in all kinds of occasions. You know, like, just think of the movies that you see, like the movies that play in Africa or they play in the early America, and you see the guys drinking coffee and fighting each other and shooting each other, and in the background it's always the tribes singing. They're always singing. Didn't you notice that?
Yeah.
Right? And we lost that completely. We don't understand that this world is there for us.
No. So are you trying to recreate some of that in your creative music?
Yeah, well, when people come for those 3 days, that's they do all day. They play and sing and they practice rhythms and so on. Yeah, exactly. But the idea is also, this is not just some kind of, you know, this is like going into more precision, not less. You know, like thinking. We in our world we think of the world of precision being a world of thinking. It's not. Music is much more precise, more detailed. You know, yeah, you're really going into a lot more detailed about life and about things and about the vibrational quality of, you know, that we actually live in, but we don't see it. We see everything as like separate and thought of as like, this is a chair, this is a table, and I have to think about this music and all of that, you know, which is much less refined than the actual vibrational world that's going on, you know.
You remind me of Roswell Rudd.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
You know, he said a similar thing.
Yeah, of course. He knows.
He knows. Well, boy. My head is spinning.
You wanted to play that jazz dance?
Yes, I'm going to do that.
So
but, you know, I remember I've done some work with, I was telling Ingrid about working with school teachers who are not music teachers, classroom teachers.
Right.
And sometimes they would say the most interesting things about music.
Yeah.
Because they were not musically trained.
Right.
And they would have this insight into something, and they were almost embarrassed to say it to me. Because, I don't know anything about music, but then they would say some observation like, wow, I never would have heard that because maybe I'm thinking too much about it or something like that.
So what would they say, for example?
I won't be able to tell you. It's how they hear the beat or, you know, something the singer's doing or just the way...
right. I mean, just yesterday we had this experience. You know, we were rehearsing a choir. Ingrid is conducting a choir at the Tibetan monastery, and we are working with actual mantras and with songs that are traditional, Tibetan traditional songs. Mm-hmm. And we invited 5 or 6 people into the choir who all said we are tone deaf and we can't sing and we don't. And all 5 of them at the end said, "Can we come back next week?" You know, because it's just like there's no other experience other than getting involved in music. There's no other experience. It's like everybody can get that. And I'm telling these people, you might be thinking of yourself as tone deaf and you may not even hit the note, but you're going to hit a note that harmonizes because you're going to feel right. So all you need to do is not worry about whether you catch that note. You catch the sound and you become part of it. And then you're going to create a sound that's comfortable for you and for us. You know, we all can harmonize. It doesn't have to be, as a matter of fact, it shouldn't be the same note. So that's the basis of this.
Okay. This is, I believe, from one of your, oops, I think I lost it. Let me find what I'm after here. You know, some of your workshops are on YouTube, and
It's you and her. You.
I believe you were conducting this.
You mean that's the improvisers orchestra?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Do you think of yourself as a conductor when you're doing this, or do you think of yourself as something else?
I don't know what you mean.
Okay.
I'm conducting.
Yes, you are. But what are you hoping to get?
Oh, I'm trying to harmonize with people, like in terms of dynamics. You know, like there are really two chief elements in music that are the most important, and that's dynamics and rhythm, or timing, you know. So, and the conductor can do a lot about that. You know, like the same sound is going to work harmonically if it's in a certain dynamic spectrum, and it won't work in another. And timing is like crucial for that as well. And those two elements a conductor can in an improvised situation can help control, and give people an idea, you know, where to go and where to come out, where to go in, where to blend and how to blend.
Yes.
You know, and blending is a lot to do with dynamics, but also with timing. And those two parameters are the most important in music. You know, like, you know, it doesn't matter what note you play how you play it. You see?
I wrote that down. You said that somewhere.
Yeah. It's
Can you expand on that?
Well, you know, every note contains every other note, if you know about the overtones, right? There's no note left out. Once you hit a sound, all others will show up in the overtone spectrum, you know? You can't really hear them, but you can hear them in the tempo, you know? All right, so anyone could play any other note to that, but depending where it sits in the overtone range, it has to be dynamically softer or stronger, you see, and then it will harmonize. So you know, so one practice we do with the improvisers orchestra, which by the way had like its 74th performance now already in 3 years, and has over 30 musicians in it, you know. And some of them like really amazing improvisers, young and old. You know, Warren Smith is the drummer who is like 80. Well, anyway, I lost my train of thought.
Talk about dynamics and
So one practice we do for a half hour every time we perform is we play a random chord. Everybody keeps that note in mind that he just played.
That they chose?
Yeah, they chose, it's random.
Okay.
On cue, everybody at the same time. So it's totally cacophonic, we would call it, right? Okay, so now we're going to spend the next, let's say 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, repeating this chord until it harmonizes. All right? And only by way of dynamics.
Wow.
And if that doesn't work, which we'll find out after 5 minutes, we're going to be able to, the individual player may switch like within a half tone, you know. So you think of D, and let's say you play a D, so the D can be flat and the D can be sharp, right? So D sharp to D flat is that's like one note. You just find the right tuning, so to speak. You know, and so we tune for like 10 minutes until that chord is there. right? Out of a sudden it sounds like you couldn't have written it any better, right? So, and then what happens is, this is a process that takes time at first, right? So you would think, oh, this couldn't be done in a performance, but it's not true, because time is completely relative. Once you get attuned to that process in those 10 minutes, you will do that process for the rest of the performance. So like about 20 minutes into the performance, I could just not write it any better.
So the chord that you arrive at after all this, it could be a very complex chord, right?
Yeah, but we're also using scales, for example.
Okay.
You know, so just play chords within the scales. So we do a lot of that too.
All right.
You know, so it really alternates between simple and complex. Also, you know, like I may use a pentatonic scale. You know, but then you have the 12-tone scale around that as approach notes. You know, but you have a pentatonic chord, right?
Yeah.
So you create your chords there, and then you improvise. You use all the notes, but you're using these as your chord. You know, so that would be one area. You know, then we may use music from like a Turkish folk music line, which has a particular scale, right? So we would practice that for 10 minutes, and then use that as the center for the improvisation, and so on, you know. So it's not all 12-tone improvisation, and there's no such thing as 12 tones. There's like millions of tones, as I explained to you. And the other part that I'm trying to emphasize is the novelty of every sound. You know, there is no sound that can ever be repeated. You cannot repeat the note that you just played, because the overtone, the amount of harmonics is in the thousands. Or actually, it's like an ant. You know, would you think that the ants are going to be organized in the same relationship to each other? So think of the harmonics that way. So there is no sound that you'll ever repeat. Everything is new. You know. So once you become aware of that and then you're going to be become a lot more careful about what you do. You know.
Wow, that's such an interesting thing for you to say.
Yeah.
About being careful.
Yeah.
Because.
Exactly. Well, it's about more precision. It's not about, like, more freedom is not about less precision. It's about more precision. The more precise you get, the more free you are. You know. See, like the whole thing is people think of sense of freedom, free jazz, is about, oh yeah, I can lose all these rules. Actually, I'm creating my own rules, and they're much more stringent. Much more stringent than anybody can tell me from the outside. You have to become self-disciplined, you know. So it's not like discipline that somebody tells you from here to follow, but you are creating a sense of self-discipline and responsibility for each note you play, you know. How does it harmonize? How does it time? How is his timing? How does it work? Do I am helping the others to sound good? That's the other question. How do I make everyone else sound good?
As a conductor, have you ever had to sort of wave somebody out?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
And that's okay?
That happens all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. But I don't wave them out. I wave them down or up.
Wave them down or up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bring them out, for example. If somebody really stands out like a sore thumb, you either make him a soloist or you bring him down into the sound.
I see.
You know?
That's very interesting.
Very often we'll make it a soloist. We stop even the whole orchestra and let him play.
This piece, that in a couple minutes, I noticed, everybody stops and a trumpet player starts.
Yeah, exactly. I do that all the time.
Okay.
You know, so the idea is really to create relatively short, dense moments but have like create like duets and trios and solos and have like chamber sounds and have strings and like, and so it becomes like a very varied. It's like going to heaven.
It's like going to
It's
heaven.
like going to heaven.
Oh.
You know, that's what I imagine heaven to be. So we're going to heaven every other week.
That looked great on your promo. You know, come with us. We're going to heaven every other week. Wow.
Right.
That's terrific stuff. I really enjoyed that. You know, the thing you said about the European free jazz became more about form.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, the new music, the whole music from since Wagner. Wagner didn't even call it music anymore. He called it Tonkunst, which means tonal art. So they were thinking more in terms of what an architect would think about, you know? Mm-hmm. So music became like sounding architecture.
Does that alienate part of your audience to, it's like making it that much harder for the average listener to, if they're trying to, well...
No, we see, like, the problem that we have with audiences is not so much, once there's an audience there, they're going to be very happy, always.
I love it.
You know, I have not seen an audience that walked away and didn't like it, what we did. But to get them there, that's our question. You know, the problem is the industry has divided the music in such pieces that people don't know anymore where the music really is. Like it's not in the categories anyway. Just because somebody played a certain category of music doesn't mean it's good or bad, you know. Yeah. And it's very hard to get an audience to come and listen to you, just to actually come there, you know.
You said something that I related to when you did young audiences back in the 70s, that you felt the sixth graders at that point were ready to absorb anything.
Well, it's true. Like that sort of gave me one of the ideas to the Creative Music Studio, because I realized that people are much more open to anything you know, than you would ever imagine. Like we always have this idea everybody is sort of this personality and they are like set in their ways. But they're setting it in their ways much later, you know. But now it's probably more like the fourth graders, right?
Yes.
You know, when you go to a sixth grader now, they're already inundated with all this iPhone stuff, you know.
Right.
And they probably think that music is what comes out of this little machine, you know.
Exactly, it is. Do you think that the ubiquitous nature of music has made it less magical?
Say that again.
Well, there's music everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, a little kid can have 1,000 songs in their little device, and it's usually in stores, or if you go to the mall, there's always music playing.
Right.
I wonder if it makes it less special.
Well, it's not live, you know, and so people don't even know what music is. I mean, that's not music. That's recorded music. You know, that's like electronic sound, you know, and electronic sound immediately translates all these millions of vibrations that make music unique into identifiable patterns, you know. So basically the music is being patterned by electronics, you know, and so out of a sudden the magic that music has is in its newness, in its freshness, in its unrepeatability. It's not repeatable, live music, you know. And so once you get to that experience, then you probably start to know what music is about. But so when you listen to electronic music through loudspeakers, no matter how good they are being streamlined into electronic vibrational system, right? Which is repeatable, because you can play the same CD again, so you hear the same music again. So you're using the music really to to escape the fear factor in life, you know, like we have this fear factor of anything really new and really unknown. So this is all known. This is all known area. You basically use the music in order to create a comfortable world that you know what it is.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So they don't know music. They don't, and even if they go to a concert, the bands make sure it sounds like a record. You know, they all have electric guitars. They make sure it distorts, and make sure the drums is too loud. They make sure the bass is too loud, and they make sure the speakers are so big that it throws you over, right?
Yes, it pushes you in the chest.
Right, exactly. So basically you're just repeating the same experience that you had with your iPhone before.
I see.
They just had the Rock and Roll Festival in Saugerties. The last one was 1994. They had Bob Dylan. Now it's all computer music.
Oh.
Yeah, they had laptops on stage. You know?
Oh, yes.
And people dance to laptop beats, which are not generated even by a human being. They like
Right.
In 94 was the last festival. Was Bob Dylan was there.
Gee.
And Joe Cocker was there.
So people don't really know music.
No.
You know, you say there's a lot of music, but there's less and less music, really.
No.
Live music.
So let's suppose later on this afternoon you have some free time and you feel like composing a new song or new piece.
Right.
Do you have a starting point?
Yeah. I usually start with an E.
With
an E. E?
an E?
Yeah.
You start with an E.
No, I'm just joking.
He's making fun of me. You better don't go to an interview with Ornette. You're going to be really in trouble.
No, this is the answer that Derek Bailey gave.
I see.
Yeah, somebody asked him, so how do you get going? How do you start? I usually start with an E.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I might have to use that myself.
Yeah.
Pass it on.
No, like lately I've been writing mostly from a melodic point of view. So the idea is to create two intervals and see what they want to do, you know, and then write from there, and then create counterline to that. Like I'm thinking a lot counterpointally. I'm not thinking in terms of chord structures. So the chords are sort of a result, just like in the improvised orchestra. They're a result of what everybody plays rather than a given, you know. Yeah. So it's all counterpointal. You know, so two lines is usually for me quite sufficient, because I also think that the audience, the listener, has much more of a capacity to play music in their minds than most people give them credit for. So what I want to do with our music is play as little as necessary to get the audience to play in their heads. You know, so when you play two notes, you're not defining the chord. You're simply giving an idea. So if 5 people listen to it, they'll hear 5 different chords, but they're hearing their own chords. You see, like they're hearing what they want to hear out of this. So they're becoming engaged. You see what I'm saying?
Active participants.
So this is why the art of not playing is sort of interests me the most. What do I need to? What is not needed? So there's always the process of writing, and then as little as necessary to make the music happening, and still then taking out some notes. You know, until you hear a structure that you know is going to work by itself. Like to me, it satisfies me, but it has enough room for people to have all kinds of fantasies around it of what it could be. You know, people fill in. People love to come and fill in, you know, with their minds. So also taking breaks, like not play. Ahmad Jamal was a great musician like that. He would do that all the time. He would play a phrase, oh, everybody heard that, right? They heard it because he didn't play it, so they heard it better. You see, like they actually played it. So he made the audience play, you know.
Yeah.
And so right now, to me, most music is overwritten, and some music is completely overwritten.
Yeah.
And there's just too much, you know. Like, you don't need to fill the skies, you know. You need to leave the skies open.
Do you ever write music that is specific to things happening in your small world or in the world as a whole?
Well, I write arrangements. That's that what you mean?
Yes, but we were chatting about this, the state of the world now. The news is not very good.
Yes.
And I wonder if that affects your thinking and your creative impulse.
Well, you know, that our teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, talked about the state of the world creating a genuine feeling of sadness. And that's happening all the time, actually. You know, there's the sadness of being alive for a few years, that you get sick and that people suffer, and you suffer for them and with them, and you're living basically in a world that generates what is called genuine sadness. What he meant by genuine is that you don't get like bogged down by it, you know, because, you know, people could kill themselves over situations like that, you know, and you don't want to go there. You know, you need to develop a strong center of your own to be able to actually be able to experience these things and not get killed by it yourself, you know. I was just yesterday reading this story about this Chicago recording guy who was so sensitive to the music and recorded everything that was played in these little clubs. And over the Iraq War, he killed himself. You know? And that's sort of a place, you know, when you deal with the arts, you're actually trying to portray and also make people go to a world where you can actually feel the positive vibration that's like really prevalent, that's like much stronger in the world. There's much more good people than bad, and there's much more people who don't want to fight than do want to fight.
Yeah.
You know? Mm-hmm. And so it seems to be very narrow interests that always create these sad situations, you know. So I don't think the music has another purpose. It's living in a different dimension, you know, to my mind. It's living in that dimension of helping people to realize the larger picture, you know, of which is actually not negative at all, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's this beautiful story about Ornette.
Say that again?
There is this beautiful story about Ornette Coleman where I had the permission to go up for the primetime rehearsals. And so I went, he knew I'm coming, he would not, I was there for like 3 or 4 afternoons, and I went up again. He knew I'm coming, so he was just doing something in the back, and he had 3 televisions going without sound. And out of a sudden he said, without saying hello to me, he just said it into the room. I just saw a young boy dying of old age on television. Teeth falling out, hair gray, wrinkled, it's a disease. And then he said, if I find that note on my saxophone that could prevent that, I know why I'm doing music. And that's just fitting what Karl says. Wow. That genuine thing of sadness, that's like in us, because we're part of the world. You know, we're not separate of the world. So we work with that. It's kind of a fact. But out of that, we have to be strong enough to really make the music as positive as possible and help people.
Well, thank you for that. Just to wrap up, could you move over? I just wanted to sort of wrap up with both of you on the thing here. I noticed that the jazz journalists last year gave you an award, Jazz Heroes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Well, neither one of you seem to have oversized egos, but if you were really honest, if you looked at your career and your output and what you're still doing, do you think of yourself as visionaries?
Oh.
Missionary?
Missionaries?
Missionary, yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes it feels like missionary.
Missionaries.
What we do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought you might say something like that because
Yeah.
visionary, that's a pretty heady word, right?
No, missionary.
Missionaries, okay. What about innovators?
Well, everybody is an innovator. If you just go to, because everybody is so unique. So if you go to what you do unique in your own unique way, that's what makes you an innovator, right?
Yeah.
Right, and that's what we've been doing all our lives. I could have had an easier life probably by staying in the system and
Yes.
teach or do
Yes.
or something, whatever. But it's much more interesting, to live the dangerous way.
Yeah. That's well said. This is a cheap thing for an interviewer to do.
Oh, okay.
But do you have anything that you'd like to say that I haven't asked you about?
It's good not to become too comfortable.
Too comfortable?
Comfortable.
Yeah, okay.
Many people are too comfortable. Puts you asleep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we won't fall
When
asleep,
we
that's
first
for
came,
sure.
when we first came to the U.S., for the first time I saw Jimi Hendrix on television. Was it the Dick Cavett show?
Yeah, Dick
or-
Cavett show.
Cavett.
Right.
And Dick Cavett said, "Could you please say something to the world after the interview to Jimi Hendrix?" And he walked out on the microphone and said, "Americans, wake up!"
Yeah.
I don't know whether he said Americans. No, I
Wake up,
didn't. He
America.
didn't.
Just
Wake
a-
up, America.
Oh, wake up, America.
Wake up, America.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
And music helps
yes.
you not to put you asleep.
Okay.
Any creative expression helps to not put you asleep.
Well, I want to thank you for this time I had today. I really
was a
enjoyed the
pleasure.
conversation
You too.
and for not taking the easy way out in your careers. And
Well,
40 years.
It's tough.
they could make it
Yeah.
easier. I
Yeah.
mean, I
It's
wish,
tough.
because the problem that we encounter is that we went through several periods of the music industry. We always loved music but we didn't like almost any of the music industry elements.
Mm-hmm.
Like the recording business, the performance business, which is cruel, and then the trying to sell your music or get your music out, which has completely changed. Like in the last 10 years, 15 years, there's an absolute complete change in output, opportunities, and so on, and also return. Even 20 years ago, when we made a CD, we knew that over the next couple of years, 5,000 copies would sell of those CDs. That was sort of the standard, and
Okay.
it was hard to sort of break through that number.
Yeah.
Now it's like you're happy if you sell 500. It's like the CD market has completely disappeared. People now, particularly young people now, believe that why should you buy music? Because you can hear everything that you want to hear at the push of 2 or 3 buttons.
Right.
Anywhere in the world, you can hear anything. So why would you want to buy anything?
Right.
So but at the same time, musicians continue to be expected to produce music. So how does that work?
Yeah.
You know, it's like insane. You know, like my performance rights organization, the returns from there have gone down to 5% of what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So what's happening, you know? So it's kind of hard for us to adapt to a system where from iTunes you get like 0.1
Right.
cent or whatever they talk about when they played your tune.
And then the next thing you know, someone has taken your CD and they're selling it themselves.
Yeah.
You know, they're just
So
ripping
it's
it
like
or whatever. Yeah.
I'm seeing like a complete deterioration of the music market particular for creative music. You know, like music that's like not like mainstream.
Yeah.
And even the mainstream guys, only like a handful of them are making money, and the rest of them is struggling at door gigs around the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But that expression door gig didn't even exist 10 years ago. So now you literally almost have to pay to play.
Pay to play. What a concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Or find a university
yeah,
job.
So I feel that the respect for music is like completely deteriorated from that point of view, you know. And but what the refreshing thing that I'm seeing, and I don't know where that's going to lead, is the more difficult it gets to be a musician, the more musicians there are. It's like literally thousands and thousands and thousands of kids who just don't want to do anything else but play music, which is like very refreshing to see. But it's also there's an element of desperation that the rest of the world doesn't seem to offer all that much. So people go there because there's really some kind of spiritual reward, at least, you know. And so I mean, the improvisers orchestra has like 60, 70 players who call me who want to play. And I thought I could do it like 3 or 4 times and then it would dissipate. And it's growing. And the quality of the music is like skyrocketing, you know, it's like amazing. Yeah. So there's such a level of music out so that I'm thinking there will eventually be some kind of qualitative jump of some sort will happen. I don't know exactly how that's going to be and whether we're going to be around to see it. But we really had to like adapt, you know, to a whole other situation over the last 20, 30 years. Yeah. Real huge change. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that sort of bright note you ended on about your improvisers orchestra.
Yeah.
Maybe things will...
yeah, that is like so refreshing to see that, you know, that like so many kids, and not just kids, as I'm saying, some performers are in their 60s and 70s and 80s, are out eager to play, you know. Don't forget also that a city like New York, which is probably the only city in the world that has such an abundance of musicians in one place, has completely different conditions, because when we were starting out in New York, we would live in lofts and for like a couple $100, you know, or less, and could play all day. And now everybody lives in little cubicles, has to come up with $2,000 a month or more, and fights to play in 6 or 7 different bands, of which they get like a maximum of 1 rehearsal per gig, of no more than 2 hours, because 3 hours would be too expensive, you know. It's like crazy. People cannot play together anymore, you know. So the whole, it's like but the pressure is getting more and more, you know, and I think it will come to a boil eventually. Right. Yeah, something will happen. And my feeling is there's a lot of creative energy out
Yeah,
there.
something's going to happen.
And something really interesting is going to happen. So,
Well, I hope we're all around to see it.
yeah, I know.
So, once again, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks.
Very interesting.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you
Okay.
so much.